Welcome back. As we focused on the South Asian summit that we've created, let's take a look at the mighty great superpower America, where Donald Trump seems to move from one gaffe to another on corona. Now, after creating a storm with his bizarre suggestion of using disinfectant to treat COVID-19 patients, the US president is claiming that his comments were intended as sarcasm. But has he done the damage already? Take a look at how Trump finds himself in another hole over corona.
Then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that?
Dangerous, bizarre, ridiculous.
No, I was asking a question.
And this came from the most powerful person on earth, the US president himself.
Then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. It knocks it out.
The moment Trump uttered those words, top White House coronavirus advisor shrank in horror. A day later, the White House and health officials are still busy putting out the fire set by Donald Trump. The US Centers for Disease Control has sent out a warning about how using household cleaners and disinfectants could be fatal. Even the makers of Lysol, Dettol and Harpic, the popular brands of disinfectants, were compelled to issue a warning.
Then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out.
Trump's comments also triggered backlash from his rivals. After much criticism, Trump attempted to walk back his dangerous and unfounded speculation.
No, I was asking a question sarcastically to reporters like you, just to see what would happen. Now, disinfectant for doing this, maybe on the hands, would work.
Memes and jokes on the latest Trumpism are flooding Twitter.
The disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
American health officials are hoping Trump's prescription to kill corona remains a joke and that nobody acts on it. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's raise the next big question. Trump's COVID strategy, is it misfiring totally? Why did Trump play down COVID initially? Upcoming polls, presidential polls distracting Trump. Are the Trumpisms going to hurt him in a presidential year and indeed the US cause? I'm joined by two very special guests. Edward Luce is one of the foremost voices, opinion voices in the United States, the US national editor of the Financial Times, the London paper widely respected. Irfan Nuruddin is Director, India Initiative at the Georgetown University and again, a professor of political science there in the heart of Washington. So the view from Washington, Ed Luce, welcome to the show. I want to understand, how is all this going to play out in a presidential year? Is this hurting Donald Trump? Are these memes simply going to disappear come November and the presidential elections?
No, I think they're going to stick. And I think that the president's advisors have been urging him to stop doing these sometimes more than 2 hour a day coronavirus briefings, because every other day he tends to indulge in some theory of a magic bullet, if you like, for the coronavirus. This isn't the first, this injecting disinfectant into you. He's been touting the anti-malarial drugs as well, the hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine and others, stuff with very little or no scientific evidence. And of course, in the case of drinking bleach, goes directly against any commonsensical scientific advice. So he is desperate for some kind of magic bullet that can enable him to switch the economy on again, like pressing a button, that will then set him back on the path in his eyes to re-election. And his advisors are all saying, look, please, Mr. President, stop these briefings, or at least keep them to a minimum, because this is damaging you.
But
and it looks like he might briefly be taking that advice.
But Ed Luce, is that in a sense damaging him on the East Coast, in areas like New York, where of course, which is seen as the COVID capital? Will it affect him, let's say, in the Midwest? Will it affect him in Republican strongholds? Does the Trump voter still remain with Trump, irrespective of whatever gaffes he commits?
The hardcore do. And it's remarkable how well his numbers have held up. I mean, they're not high by the standards of other leaders like Modi or Boris Johnson or Macron. They're not high relative to the rest of the world, but they're still remarkably stable. If you were a Martian and you descended on America and looked at the polls for the last 3 years, you'd think nothing had happened, because his numbers don't waver. But the trust numbers for his handling of the coronavirus, those specific numbers have been dropping, and it's now barely a third of Americans trust his advice on that. And most Americans give more than 2/3 trust their own governors and trust government scientists. More than 3/4, in fact, trust government scientists. So the gap between Trump and the experts is growing.
Does he, Irfan Nuruddin, though, still in a way have this ability to shift the agenda away from COVID, or do you believe COVID will haunt him all the way into November?
COVID's going to haunt him. He's met his match. The truth of it is that COVID's going to be a slow burn in Middle America. And so now we have the irony, in fact, that the hardest hit areas have been the Democratic states of New York and California, and, as you said, the coastal states. But the thing we know about COVID is that it spreads. Its virality, its transmission is higher than anything we've dealt with recently. And the states that are the Republican states that have been the slowest to slow down, slowest to issue shelter-at-home orders, it's coming to them. They can't avoid it. There's no wishful, magical thinking that somehow is going to keep it away from Middle America, and that's going to hit them in June, July, right as we really roll into the real election campaign. The other is, of course, that the economic impact of this is going to be with America for a long time to come. I mean, they're now talking about returning to pre-COVID levels of economic activity as 2023, 24, 25. So with unimaginably high unemployment rates yet to come, the truth is that it's going to stay with them. Now, as Ed said, the numbers remain stable. I mean, in the two-party system, there's a number of Republican voters who simply have no alternative. But we have to think about are the independents, the swing voters, and really the enthusiasm gap. If lots of people think that Trump really messed up the dealing with this and they're bearing the cost, they might not be willing to vote for President Biden or Senator Biden, but does that mean that they will campaign as actively for Trump as they might have if he had done a better job?
So you're saying the floating voters are the key. Ed Luce, is it at the end of the day, as the Americans say, the economy is stupid? Is it possible between now and November for the Trump administration to get the economy right?
It's quite difficult because, Trump has been trying to say, let's get the economy back. The cure is worse than the disease. We should get people back to work. And that only works if people trust him and trust his judgment. The US economy is 80% consumer-based. It's very different, say, to China, where you can get manufacturing going again because they're not consumer-facing. It's not restaurants or stadiums or face-to-face economic activity that drives the Chinese economy. That's what drives the American economy. And if people think they're going to be infected, they're not going to go back to work, and their employers are probably not going to reopen. So Trump might be the most powerful man on earth, but if the population doesn't trust him, he can't turn that button on again. And he's been trying to turn it on, but he keeps getting drowned out by his scientists who very politely advise him that's not wise.
Ed, I'm just reading a piece from theatlantic.com. I read it last week. The president is trapped. It was written last month. And it said Trump is utterly unsuited to deal with this crisis, either intellectually or temperamentally. Do you agree that he has been finally exposed, perhaps, by COVID, Ed Luce?
I do. I mean, I think for his first 3.25 years, we were saying, look, Trump's quite lucky. He hasn't met a real crisis. He hasn't been tested by a real crisis. Well, this is it. And he's failing pretty dramatically. The federal government's role, is to listen to the neutral advice of scientists and act on it and lead the country. Trump's been ignoring scientists. He's been firing and sidelining those who dispute some of these extraordinary home remedies he's been coming up with. He fires them. Now, if you fire,
but does he believe them? Sorry, Ed, to interrupt. Does he actually believe them, or does he just say it off the cuff?
So I think that his psychology here is very much bound up by needing good news and needing it frequently. And what the scientists have been saying is not on the timetable of delivering the good news he wants, i.e. everything back to normal way before November. We're talking about a staggered reopening with the possibility of shutting down again over a period of 18 months or more until we have a vaccine or a pill, as Trump calls it, that you can just take as a prophylactic, as a preventive to stop you getting the virus. Trump keeps saying that pill, here's another piece of quackery. He keeps saying that pill's around the corner. We're all going to release it soon.
Right.
There is no evidence such a pill exists.
The fact is, Irfan Nuruddin, when I go through these one-liners of Trump, virus would weaken when we go into April. One day it's going to be like a miracle. It will disappear. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. This, of course, after saying last year 37,000 died from common flu. There are only 22 COVID deaths. Anybody that needs a test gets a test, and the tests are beautiful. I mean, has the man simply lost it, or has his intellectual levels been finally exposed?
I think it's the latter. I mean, for him to have lost it would require for him to have had a grip on reality to begin with. What Trump's genius is that he gets us to focus on those one-liners. But the really insidious attack that Trump has successfully done is undermine the faith in the bureaucracy, in science, in expertise. And that is what is the true tragedy over here. America is home to maybe one of the finest research and scientific establishments in the world, right? It is the envy of the world. People come from all over the world to study at the best universities over here. And instead of letting Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx have the podium, he insists on coming and standing in front of America every day for an hour.
So the narcissism. So it's the narcissism that is letting him down, right? Which built the Trump sort of aura in a way.
I beg your pardon?
It's the narcissism that sort of is letting him down. His belief that he is sort of invincible.
It is, yeah, this is, the childhood storybook of the emperor having no clothes. We are watching it in real time. He has no clothes, and he has surrounded himself by people who are either sycophantic or, even more troublingly, see him the way in which they can get their other agendas accomplished. So Senator Mitch McConnell gets judges confirmed that he could not have confirmed otherwise. Stephen gets an anti-immigration platform passed through this White House, and the price of that is letting Trump take center stage and embarrass himself and embarrass the country that he leads.
Ed Luce, Irfan Nuruddin, always a pleasure talking to you. The View from Washington. And we will keep coming back to you because it's going to be a long summer there in the United States. Stay well, my friends. And I'm sure there'll be many more Trumpisms that we'll be tracking in the months ahead. Good to have you here talking to our audiences in India.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.